Okay, awesome. All right, so we're recording, which
Yes.
means it's time for the weekly amazing joke. So the story goes like this. Man dies, goes to heaven, and there are two lines to get into heaven. One line is for those who are independent guys, and one line is for the guys who listen to their wives. All right, so there's one guy, he's on the independent line, and he gets to the front of the line, and the angel standing there says, "Tell me, you're in the independent line. Did you truly never listen to your wife?" He says, "No, I always listen to my wife." So the angel says, "So what are you doing in this line?" He says, "My wife told me to be here." Okay, all right. That's the joke as it goes. We say every joke contains a little bit of truth.
Yeah, that's
That
true.
that was a good one. Keep that one.
Yeah.
Keep that one. You know I'm very critical. Keep that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right, so that's the story. Why am I bringing up the story? The joke actually has a connection to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about control. Last week we discussed the Beinoni, the intermediate person. So just to recap and how that'll lead us to control. Last week we discovered there's a individual who does not have the opportunity to ever become a tzaddik. In other words, they don't have the soul that will ever allow them to get rid of their evil inclination. So they will always have an internal fight going on. Because they have an internal fight going on, that means they can never be a tzaddik. A tzaddik has no internal fight. However, we said just because you have an internal fight does not mean you have to give up an inch, right? Just like if you have a city, you can have an enemy always attacking you, but you can always hold your ground. You can always hold your ground. You can not sin in thought, speech, and action. Of course, we explained what does it mean not to sin in thought. It doesn't mean the initial thought, but it means dwelling on sinful thoughts. Initial thoughts are not within our power. Impulses are not within our power. We gave one idea of how the tzaddik is able to overcome his evil inclination. Sorry, how the Beinoni, how the intermediate person is able to rule, right? Because seemingly it's very difficult. If the evil inclination is always there, how do you constantly win the battle? So we give one idea was prayer. Every time when we pray, or hopefully we can, or I should say that Beinoni, when they pray, and we can have a little bit of that, when they pray, they get uplifted to a very spiritual place, to the point where their evil inclination is, so to speak, asleep. You're just so overwhelmed with inspiration, your evil inclination falls asleep. That's what happens during prayer. And that inspiration can carry you through the day. However, be aware when you're done praying, the evil inclination does wake up, and the evil inclination does come back to you. And it will try to exert its influence over you. Let me just grab the webcam, place the webcam. And it will try to exert its influence over you throughout the day. And so that's why you have to constantly battle it. I know you don't see me. Now you see me. Okay. That's why you have to constantly battle it. Okay. That's what the evil does. However, how truly do you overcome the evil inclination the entire day? And that's going to be the next and important factor we're going to discuss here. That is called the mind rules over the heart. It's going to be on page 142 about the mind ruling over the heart. Now, I have to say this is of the most foundational ideas of Hasidic philosophy, the mind ruling over the heart. And I'll tell it with a story. I think I told it last time. I'm not sure, but the story was the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, during the war between the Tsar and Napoleon, he backed Napoleon. Various reasons beyond the scope of this discussion. And Alter Rebbe actually had one of his followers. The Alter Rebbe is the author of the Tanya. And the Alter Rebbe had one of his followers actually become a spy in Napoleon's army. So he would sit there and listen to all the plans. And Napoleon, of course, at some point realized they're spies, as there always is in war. And at one point, he rushes into the tent where they're doing all the meeting plans, and he rushes over to this chassid, this follower of the Alter Rebbe, and he says, "You're a spy." And he puts his hand over this chassid's heart, and Why? Because if someone's really a spy, their heart would start beating. However, his heart was not beating. His heart was staying still. And not staying still, but it did not go very fast. And Napoleon let him go. After the war, his fellow Hasidim asked him, how were you able to maintain control of your heart? It's so scary. Napoleon comes, accuses you of being a spy, you'd be put to death. How are you able to maintain a natural heartbeat at that time? And his answer was, which is the key of what we're studying today, he says, this is the whole idea of Hasidus Chabad, to have the mind rule over the heart. To be able to have the mind control the heart, control the emotions. He says, that's what I've been spending my whole life doing. How could I not? If I call myself a chassid, if I'm worth my salt, how could I not control my heart at that moment? Now, obviously, we understand this was a very elevated person, someone who worked on themselves a lot. But this is going to be the key of the entire discussion here, and that is the mind ruling over the heart. As you may already know, this is where the name Chabad comes from. We've spoken about many times. The name Chabad stands for wisdom, understanding, knowledge, which means the mind which will rule over the heart. And understanding that our mind controls the heart is the key to the success of the Tanya. Why do I say that? Just look at today's society. In today's society, we live in a society where the heart runs supreme, right? It's how you feel. If you feel a certain way, that's the way it should be, right? The heart today is ruling the mind. It's however you feel is the right thing. Chabad says no. We have to get to a place where we understand intellectually what is right, and then we use our mind to be the key to our heart. We don't want to become emotionless. I think there's other groups, shall I say religions, if you can call them a religion in this area, who very much try to get rid of the emotions. Pure intellect. They shut down the emotions. I think they have a big following out there in Clearwater. But Chabad, no. We actually very much believe in the emotions because we understand the emotions are the key to getting anything done. Nevertheless, we don't let the emotions run the mind. We let the mind run the emotions, right? It's like you need to have someone driving the bus. Okay, the bus is powerful. The bus is strong. The bus can get you places, but you need to have somebody driving the bus. You need to have your mind ruling over your heart, not vice versa, not allowing your heart to rule over your mind. Now, what does it mean your heart to rule over your mind? If you recall, we spoke about in previous classes about the Rasha, that it is possible for the heart to rule the mind, meaning if I desire something, then I use my mind to figure out how to get it. So what comes first in this case is the emotion. The emotion decides I want it, then the mind figures out how to get it. And you can be very smart, you can look very intellectual, but at the end of the day, it's completely being ruled by the heart. You see this in stories, love stories, obviously, where you have people who are going after relationships that are totally wrong, but their mind justifies it, and their mind tells them it's a good thing, and yada, 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 because their heart is ruling their mind. The Beinoni, the intermediate person, the one who never sins, clearly is in control and is able to make sure this never sins, thought, speech, or action. And therefore, such a person has the mind ruling over the heart. Okay, so let us take a look at the text over here. We're going to read some text. I do want to say something else, by the way. This idea that the mind rules over the heart, when you read the Tanya, it makes it sound absolute. And it's been a very triggering idea to many people. I don't know if you're just getting into the Tanya, but if you grow up with this idea that the mind rules over the heart, then as you get older, and I guess I'm talking from personal experience, you kind of wonder, like, well, why don't I control myself? Why can't I control myself? Why do I ever make a mistake? If it's just so easy, the mind rules over the heart, just a simple turnkey solution, why is it that we struggle? You know, why can't I just avoid that cookie? The mind rules over the heart. Just tell myself not to do it, right? But then we go ahead and do it. So I will touch upon that and what some presentations have been given about it. But let's study the actual content, and then we'll get a discussion about this idea, the mind rules over the heart, which is the core teaching of the Tanya. It's really the pathway through which everything runs. So let's take a look at over here. What did I say? Okay, all right. So we were discussing last time, and by the way, we read the top of 143. I'm going to get there. Okay, so this we're picking up at the bottom of 142. We were discussing last time how the evil inclination, our animalistic soul, after we pray, comes back alive and attempts to get us to sin. And we said, nevertheless, the Beinoni has complete self-control and never gives in. I mentioned last time that self-control means you have to control yourself, right? If there was no warring factions, there wouldn't be self-control. Now, the Tanya says like this. What does it mean you have self-control in your thoughts, right? We understand you can have self-control in your actions. We understand you can have self-control in your thought. Now he's going to explain how you can even have self-control in your mind. And that's going to lead us into talking about the mind rules over the heart. So again, we're going to get to this idea of the mind ruling over the heart, which is the key of the Beinoni, the intermediate person. Our avenue, our highway, our street to get there is by talking about this fact that the Beinoni never sins, even in his mind, means he has control even over his mind. So let's take a look. So the Beinoni never allows his thoughts to dwell in the pleasures of this world, how to satisfy his heart's desires. Again, keyword is to dwell. Doesn't mean he never gets such thoughts, but he doesn't dwell on them. And when we talk about pleasures of the world, we're talking about self-gratification. The Beinoni cannot stop the urge for self-gratification from entering his mind. What he can do is refrain from intentionally dwelling on such a thought, having substantive thought, by diverting his mind to something else, as we will discuss further on. Still, the self-mastery of the Beinoni is difficult to fully understand. If he harbors the desire for self-gratification in his soul, surely at some point his desire will eventually overcome him. How can we be assured that in every occasion he will not allow his mind to dwell on these urges or act on them in any way? So here it's, again, an intellectual question, which is basically, how can we know that the Beinoni will never, ever sin? And the answer will be, of course, if the mind is in the right place, you can be assured you will never sin. And that's, by the way, a key to a question I asked a moment ago, right? I asked a moment ago, so why can't we control ourselves? One of the answers is that our mind is not fully made up. The Beinoni is someone whose mind is fully made up and dedicated to serving God and never giving into any self-gratification. Therefore, once you've come to that conclusion and life choice, you'll be in full control forever. Until you change your mind. The problem with most of us, as we'll see soon, is our minds are not made up. That's the problem. But again, getting back to the main point. So the Tanya is saying, how can we be assured that a Beinoni is someone who never, ever sins? The answer the Tanya is going to be because naturally the mind rules over the heart. And I'm telling you as a parenthesis, and because their mind is made up of what they want to do, therefore the mind will always win over the heart. So let's take a look. Right? Me and you, we're not sure if we want the cookie or we want the calories, right? They're both good options. You know, there's a trade-off for each, you know? So that's kind of why we do it that way. Okay, so to answer this question, Tanya cites a fundamental teaching of the Zohar about human nature. And by the way, this is quoted in Pinchas, just putting that out there. Since inherently and in its natural capacity, the brain rules over the heart, as stated in the Zohar, portion of Pinchas 3:224a. For that is how man is formed at birth. So again, it's saying we are born with a natural ability for the mind to rule over the heart. We know this is true because we see people can go against their very nature. How is it possible that Jews gave up their lives for God? It's not the heart. Maybe it is, but I believe it's the mind. Unless they were in the middle of deep prayer. But again, in many cases in our lives, we choose to go against our heart. The ultimate arbitrator is the mind, assuming the mind is made up. So let's continue. If your mind is not made up, then your heart will take you for a ride. All right, so he says like this. This means that any person can, with the willpower of his brain, restrain himself and take control of his heart's urges. That's why it's so triggering. It's willpower, right? It makes it sound so simple, right? It's just willpower. If you just want it, you'll do it. That's true. It's true. You can, with the willpower of your brain, restrain yourself and take control. And I'm going to keep reiterating, assuming that's what you actually want. So as to prevent his heart's desires from being enacted, spoken, or contemplated, to divert his attention away from his heart's urges entirely to something completely different. So this was going back to what we said, right? How can you have control over your thoughts? How can you stop yourself from dwelling on the self-gratification thoughts, things that you want? His answer is that if your mind truly rules your heart, your willpower will be able to control even your thoughts. Now, obviously, by the way, as I'm sure you know, right? You cannot stop thinking about something. You have to positively think about something else. What that means is if you get a self-gratification thought, you can choose to instead think about thoughts of Torah. The problem is that we both want to study the Torah and self-gratification, right? We're on our phones, right? We're on our phones. We know, it's just a good example. We're on our phones. We know we should be studying the latest Tanya class the Rabbi uploaded. But there's also a couple interesting articles. I just want to listen to one more, but I really want to listen to the Tanya class, right? But that's the thing. You're not fully committed that you want to listen to Tanya class. You want to listen to the Tanya class, and you also want to scroll, right? As they say, you want to have your cake and eat it too. Well, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, your mind will not be able to fully control your heart. Let's continue. By stressing the brain rules over the heart as a natural function. The Tanya, the Tanya, where am I? The Tanya takes our discussion temporarily away from the war between good and evil. Your ability to divert a certain negative thought or to refrain from a particular destructive action does not depend on your level of self-mastery or tapping into the powers. So again, what this is saying here is that whether you are a Beinoni or not, the mind ruling over the heart is a natural function. So even if you are not generally a Beinoni, you can completely rule over your negative thoughts at this moment. As he says here at the bottom, just giving commentary. No special talent must be learned for me to be in total control of my thoughts, speech, and action. Through willpower alone, the brain I can give or withhold active expression to any of my feelings. That does not mean it's easy for me to be controlled, but it is possible. Let's look at the next page. Right? Let's zoom in. So again, he was saying that, so we're on page 144. Okay, so we said that it does not depend on your level of self-mastery or tapping into the powers of good in the universe. It is simply a function of the human condition. Your brain is able to exert sufficient willpower to control your actions and substantive thoughts. All right, so this is so far. So far what Adler is saying like this. Putting religion aside, the mind has the natural ability to rule on the heart, which, by the way, can apply both for the positive and the negative. If you have if your mind is made up to do something negative, You can overcome your emotions. For example, some people who are really cruel despite certain feelings. Yeah, during the Holocaust, you had many people who were friends with the Jews, and some of them actually felt some levels of friendship, but their minds and the cruelty was able to overcome those friendships. We have stories, ideas where you can see people had semi-remorse, but nevertheless they went through with their evil actions. If your mind is made up, nothing can stop it. But now he's going to add, then actually serving God, the mind ruling over the heart, when it comes to serving God, is actually easier than it should naturally be. So he's really giving us, again, Tanya is giving us the keys and the tools how we can control our thought, speech, and action. Remember, our inner turmoil, we may not be able to control. We can maybe change it slowly over time, change our character over time to be a little bit better. But our inner turmoil is never going to go away. However, Tanya tells us each and every single one of us has the ability to control our thought, speech, and action at any given time. Number one, because the mind rules over the heart. And now he's going to say, in particular, when it comes to serving God, we have an additional, we're given additional powers. This is what he's going to add over here. In addition to this physical power to control the human urge, there's a metaphysical advantage too. So it's like this. This is particularly true when you are attempting to coerce your will in the direction of holiness. As the verse states, and I saw there is an advantage to wisdom over stupidity, like the advantage of light over darkness. This is from King Solomon. All the commentaries ask on this verse, very simple question. Right? This is what's so beautiful about commentaries and verses. When you go into the commentary, it's much better, right? When you first read the verse, it's like I saw there's an advantage of wisdom over stupidity, like advantage of light over darkness. Sounds nice. Nice correlation, right? But actually, it's very questionable. Whenever you're comparing two things in scripture or a lesson, there has to be a lesson in the comparison, right? In other words, it's already obvious that wisdom is greater than stupidity. At least I hope so, right? I know they say common sense is not all that common, but wisdom is clearly superior to stupidity. What does comparing it to light over darkness add to our understanding of that, right? It would be like saying, you give any other example, right? Sweet things are better than bitter things, like light is better than darkness. Okay, I mean, they're both one is better than the other, but it's like, right? It's like saying having $1 billion is better than having $1 million, like having sweet food is better than having bitter food. Okay, but what does the comparison add to my understanding? I already knew $1 billion is better than $1 million. I already know wisdom is better than stupidity. What is adding in this comparison to light over darkness? And we're going to say something beautiful. And he says like this. Meaning that just as light has the advantage of control and dominance over darkness, in that physically a small amount of light will push away a lot of darkness, and there is no struggle between the light and the darkness, which is displaced automatically and effortlessly. In the same way, a lot of stupidity of klipa and sitrach and left chamber, the heart will be automatically pushed away by a small amount of light to the divine soul. Beautiful. Beautiful. What this means to say is that the power that godliness has over the unclean forces of this world is a utter dominance, right? If you light one candle in a dark room, number one, there's not a struggle going on, right? Sometimes you mix chemicals, there's a struggle going on. There's no struggle between light and dark. When light wants to be in a place of dark, it's there without a struggle. Number two, it's immediate and it's effortless. What this means is that when light, when goodness is given a chance to shine, stupidity and the wrong things run away quickly. You just have to allow the light to shine. But we see this all the time. People in life, they get enlightened. They get uplifted to understanding there's more to life. And the moment you do that, all the stupidity of life seems like nothing. It seems irrelevant. I'm going to explain more on this in a moment. I just want to read this paragraph here. Then I'll explain a little bit more in a moment, because you may be asking, Rabbi, but it's not so easy. I don't see darkness disappearing so quickly. So let's continue reading. It goes without saying that wisdom is preferable to stupidity and light is preferable to darkness. Ecclesiastes come to teach us the dynamic through which wisdom dispels stupidity. When you light a small candle in a large dark room, you can suddenly see throughout the entire room. The same is true with the spiritual enlightenment. As soon as an insight into higher living resonates with you as true, years or even decades of prior confusion have been instantly resolved. We see this all the time. If you come to show, we print out these papers about people who live their lives many ways, many years in one way, and then suddenly they get enlightened, and decades of long-held beliefs fall away. The divine soul's advantage over the animal soul is that wisdom, the divine soul, dispels stupidity. The animal soul effortlessly, just as light dispels darkness. Now he's going to ask a question, but if that's the case, if it's so easy, why, right? As they say, if it's so easy, why isn't everybody doing it? Or as he's going to ask here, if it's so easy, how is there a choice between good and evil? He says like this: however, this does not violate the principle God has made one opposite the other, that the forces of evil equally match the forces of good so as to give you free choice. It's just that good and evil pull, let's go to the next page, pull you in different but ultimately equal ways. Evil's special lore is that its temptation is tangible and worldly, but evil's great weakness is that its bubble can burst instantly into little wisdom and enlightenment. That's the important line here. And I'll give an example to what he just said here. But that's basically how a level playing field, right, does not mean they're the same. That's what the Tanya is telling us. So the godly soul has certain benefits, and the animal soul has certain benefits. That's how they have a level playing field, but it doesn't mean they're the same. Okay? And so I want to present this with a fascinating statement from the Talmud. The Talmud says, in the Tractate of Sukkah, I believe, that when Mashiach comes, the wicked people will, it says God will take the evil inclination and slaughter it, whatever that looks like, whatever that means. And it says the evil people will cry. When I say evil, I mean those who failed, maybe me and you, right? And the righteous people will cry. The evil people will cry, the wicked people will cry, because they will say, wow, look at this little hill. Why did we not overcome it? Basically saying this evil inclination wasn't nothing. It was a pushover. Why didn't we overcome it before Mashiach? And it says the righteous people will cry, but they'll say something totally different. The righteous people will cry, will say, wow, this evil inclination was such a big mountain. Wow, we're so blessed God allowed us to overcome this mountain. Question is, which one is it? Is the evil inclination easy to overcome, or is it hard to overcome? Is it a mountain, or is it a little hill? The answer is what we just said. Is that the evil inclination has the power of the smokescreen, temptation, desire, passion. When you see that ice cream, you want it. It burns within you. The desire is so powerful, it makes it seem so great. But yet, it's a smokescreen. Because number one, when you give into it, it's never really as great as you wanted it to. And when you deny yourself it, after a while, you realize it wasn't that important. There are multiple examples that I can give to this, and I'll give a couple examples to this. I say these stories a couple times. I might be a broken record on this, but one of my stories, hi Rick, good to see you. One of these stories, just to show how the evil inclination is a smokescreen. So I'll give you an example where I gave into a temptation and, wasn't that great. So for example, I remember I went to, I think I was going to Cleveland. Yeah, I was going to Cleveland for a week. And everybody told me, when you get to Cleveland, go to this and this bakery. And in that bakery, if you order this and this donut, or you order this and this Danish, or whatever it was, It's unbelievable. It's out of this world. It's so delicious. You gotta try it. You gotta go there. And like a couple of people told me, like, you gotta go get it. You gotta take it. Oh my gosh, it's so delicious. It's so wonderful. Let me tell you, after hearing all about this wonderful donut in Danish and how delicious it was, had to try it. So one day we were there in Cleveland. We went to the bakery. We got it. And I ate it. I'll tell you, it was good. It was good. It was good. It wasn't as wow as I was imagining, right? The Talmud says, the Rabbi is saying in the Talmud, Ein Adam met v'chatzi tavato biyado. Good to see you, Ahava. A person does not die with even half of their desires. The evil inclination, this is what we just read here in the Tanya, it excels in the smoke screen. It excels in making things look so enticing, so wonderful, so delicious. You see it, you want to have it, right? It's like that restaurant. You got to have that thing. And you know what? It's good. But as we just said, nobody dies with even half of what they want. Because whatever you imagine it to be, it's never that good. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good. But it's never that good. You know? It's good. Don't get me wrong. Present to you the flip side. Anybody here who has denied themselves of certain foods, maybe you're on a diet or something, right? When you first start to deny yourself, it's very difficult. When you first start to deny yourself, it's very hard. You really want it, whether it's smoking, whether it's soda, whether it's coffee, whatever it is that you're cutting out of your diet. But eventually, it doesn't bother you. I mean, you know, when I was 14 or 15, I remember exactly the age. You know, my doctor told me not to drink any more caffeine. And before then, I used to be a big drinker of Dr. Pepper. I love Dr. Pepper. I used to get a case every week or two. And the beginning it was hard. Today, I really don't care to drink. I don't think I've had any Dr. Pepper, even like cheating on it in years. I don't actually desire Dr. Pepper. You know what I mean? Like physical pleasures, they look amazing. They look wonderful. They have the smoke screen. But when you actually overcome them, you see how it was just what is it? It was a paper. You know, it was just a piece of paper. You could blow it away in the wind. Whew, you blow it and it's gone. And that's what we mean. That's what we mean over here in the Tanya. This is what we're saying. We're saying that godliness, godly things are more powerful than the klipa, than the unclean forces, like light over darkness. When you allow the light to shine, you see the darkness just dissipates. The struggle goes away. But till you get there, it's very hard because there's the smoke screen. And so that's the level playing field, right? In other words, when you're doing the wrong thing, you can always feel guilty about doing the right thing. But when you're doing the right thing, typically the guilt of doing the wrong thing disappears. Maybe you want it in the back of your mind, but it's not so enticing in the moment. And you're happy, you're proud of yourself, you're happy you've overcome. And so this is what the Tanya is presenting here, this two-pronged approach of the control that we can have over acting out in our thought and speech and action. Again, we are saying that we do not necessarily have the ability to control our inner selves. We may always have a struggle within us, but we always have the ability to control our thought, speech, and action. And it's a two-step power process he gives us here. Number one, naturally your mind rules over your heart. Number two, on top of that, if what your mind is deciding is something godly, then the evil will disappear like darkness disappears in the face of light. Now I come back to my original point. Now, this sounds very easy. It sounds very easy. It's not very easy, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But so far, you get the idea. I hope I presented the ideas. And I think we all know this to be true, that that the evil within our souls, when we allow the good light to shine, the evil disappears. Now he's going to say, I'm just going to read this till we get to the next section over here. Read this. And here he says that if that's the case, if the evil is just a bubble, if the evil is darkness, it can be pushed away in front of light, how is it that the evil has power over us? And he says like this, as our sages of blessed memory taught, a man will not commit a sin unless a delusional spirit enters him. To sin, you have to be delusional. Sounds weird, right? You think to sin, you just have to be normal. But no, to sin, you have to be delusional. Why? We all know. When we're feeling godly, sin does not have any hold of us. We're not interested in it. Which means that the sinning, in the Tanya's worldview, is indicative of allowing the delusional spirit to take a hold of you. The Tanya will explain more about the delusional spirit in further chapters. But let's read over here. And the delusion caused by the animal soul can be instantly dispelled by the wisdom of the divine soul found in the brain, whose will is to have exclusive control over the small city and to express itself in the three garments mentioned above, the thought, speech, and action mentioned above, namely the thought, speech, and action of the 630 mitzvahs of the Torah mentioned above. Okay, so he was just saying that this foolishness of the animal soul can be pushed away in a moment's time, just due to the power of your godly soul. All right. As I started the class, this idea that the mind rules over the heart is a foundational idea. And like I said, I know it disturbs many people because many people want to understand if the mind truly rules over the heart, why do I find it so difficult to do the right thing? So we've already presented the smoke screen. But the other thing that I've been presenting this whole time is this idea that our minds are not made up. And that's part of the problem. Part of the mind work that we have to do is not only to just decide to do the right thing, more importantly, to really decide that that's what we want. That's part of what we have to work on. In other words, part of our spiritual development is not only getting to a decision that we want to do the right thing because it's the right thing, but we have to get to a point where that's what we really want, because very often we have multiple things that we really want. You have to come to a place where that's what you really want. For example, I think everybody wants to keep kosher. Everybody wants to keep Shabbos. Everybody wants to study Torah all day. Nobody wants to waste time on their phones. But we all do some of those things because there is a lack of 100% desire in any of those things. We're not fully committed for whatever reason. There's multiple reasons why we may not be fully committed. I want to read to you, because again, I said many people who grew up with the Tanya have been, I don't want to say traumatized, but I might use the word traumatized. This whole idea of the mind rules over the heart, and when you hear it, especially when you grow up young with it, you don't fully grasp it. Like when I was young, I didn't grasp this idea that, well, it just sounds simple, right? So then you beat yourself up if your mind is not controlling your heart, right? It says your mind should control your heart, right? It sounds like a simple, if you just read it superficially, your mind should control your heart and you should get everything done right. And then you wonder why are you not able to just control? What happened? Is the Tanya wrong? So I did a Google search of did a Google search with the word Chabad and mind ruling over the heart, and I found two very interesting articles. So one interesting article was to people who are in like the 12-step programs, and they really want to know, right? The whole idea of an addict seemingly seems counterintuitive to what we're saying here. If someone's an addict, if they study the Tanya, we should tell them, no big deal. You don't want to drink alcohol, you don't want to smoke, you don't want to do deviant behaviors, just mind rules over the heart. People want to know why it doesn't work. People want to know what's the problem. So let us read over here. This is like this. So this is one commentary talking about why people still have addictions and have problems. So like this. The Moach Shalat Alev, mind rules over the heart, is the oft misquoted and misunderstood concept of Tanya. The actual quote from the Tanya reads, the mind, by virtue of its inherent nature, is master over the left part of the heart, over the mouth and all the limbs, which are instruments of action, but that's an incomplete sentence. The full quote of Tanya continues, except in him who is completely wicked, and that's in a later chapter, as the Rabbi said, the wicked are under control of their heart, but their heart is in no way controlled by them. This is a punishment for their enormity of the potency of their sin. So here we're presenting one caveat to what we just said. Number one, if someone is truly wicked, they can lose this power of the mind over heart. Now, I don't think any of us are truly wicked, but certain people in certain areas of their life, as you see, it is possible they can lose control. So that's number one we have to understand. It's possible that the Tanya's advice here of mind ruling over the heart may not be enough in certain instances because in a certain area of your life, you've just totally lost it. And that's just, for example, an addiction. And in that case, the person needs to get medical help, and studying the Tanya alone will not be enough. And therefore, someone who has an addiction or something like that should not beat themselves up, or someone who smokes and is really addicted to it, and just the mind over the heart is not working. Again, for some people it will work, but don't beat yourself up over if it's not working. So again, he says, oftentimes people hear Mol Shalat Alev, mind rules over the heart, and figure that Tanya is saying a universal rule that applies to everyone, that a person can think his way out of a situation he finds himself in. Nothing can be further from the truth. It's not what the Tanya is saying at all. Whether you consider addiction a disease or a sin, addicts are clearly powerless over the Tanya does not suggest otherwise by making a blanket statement that the mind rules over the heart. Even if someone, and here's the interesting line, even if someone is not completely wicked, he may still find himself unable to completely free himself of the obsessions of the heart. As the Tanya says further in chapter 28, with regards to being an intermediate person, however, if he finds it hard to dismiss these lustful imaginations or extraneous thoughts from his mind, because they distract his mind with great intensity, then he should humble his spirit before God and supplicate to him his thought to have compassion upon him and his abundant mercies. This is the admission of powerlessness of step one of believing that only the greater power can restore ourselves to sanity. So here's saying another interesting, important point. He's saying, in addition, there's another possibility. Sometimes you really need to pray to God. You need to humble yourself to God. And just willpower alone without prayer is not going to be enough. And that's another important caveat that Tanya gives later. So I gave you two caveats over here. It's possible, number one, certain areas of your life are beyond your control. Caveat number two is that sometimes you need God's help. Sometimes you need God's help. And that's a very important point that we need, because we love to be self-reliant people. And this idea that we need God's help in every area of our life applies also to our spiritual uncontrol over ourselves. And sometimes if we're finding that we're not having control over ourselves, it may be a sign that God wants us to pray to him. God may be sending us a message that, hey, I'm not going to allow you to overcome whatever's going on in your life. You need to humble yourself and pray to me. And that's another important caveat. I want to read this other article here. This is not so much, I added a third consideration, right? So this article gave two considerations. Number one, it said, is that someone who has an addiction or, certain areas of your life could be out of your control. Number two is sometimes God wants us to pray to him to regain that control. I gave a third caveat. Sometimes our minds are not decided. I think that's usually the biggest problem. Our minds are not decided. But I want to read this article, which is this next article, which really also presents the beauty of the mind ruling over the heart. Now, this article is from My Life Chassidus Applied. For those who heard of Rabbi Simon Jacobson, he wrote a book, really a wonderful book called Towards a Meaningful Life, one of the best-selling Jewish books of all time. Of course, the Bible is the best-selling book, but a great book. And he had these contests where people would write articles of how Chassidus changed their lives. It's very good. You should go there one time. Look, go to the Chassidus Applied website, and you can find the essays. And the essays really are wonderful essays by people like you and me who write articles of the way Hasidic philosophy changed their lives. So very well worth website to visit. And one of these articles was by a woman called Chani Herzog. Don't know who she is, but she wrote a very nice article on this idea that we're presenting now, and how this idea of the mind ruling the heart can be a life-changing idea for our own personal dilemmas and our happiness. So let's read this article together. Again, I believe this article is so important because, again, we're studying the Tanya. We're studying the Tanya, how it can change our lives. We're not just trying to get the intellectual idea, oh, what is a tzaddik? What is a Beinoni? What is a Rasha? We want to know how these ideas of the Tanya change our lives. As I kept saying throughout this course, throughout the Tanya, I keep saying, we have both a general outlook the Tanya is giving us, and each and every single chapter, each and every single lesson that we study has ideas within it that we can take today for us. And so that's what I want to jump in over here on this topic with the mind ruling over the heart. So we're not trying to cover ground, we're trying to change ourselves. So let's read this article. In a generation heavily plagued by its desire for instant gratification, there is something everyone is still fighting for: happiness. That elusive word so often spoken about and so often misunderstood. On a global scale, millions of dollars are spent in various methods in pursuit of happiness. But I'm gonna let me put this article also in the chat for anybody who wants to look at it later. Just remember, if it's in the chat, click on it sooner than later, because when the class is over, the chat disappears. So you have the link to this article. On a global scale, millions of dollars are spent in various methods in pursuit of happiness. For so many, these are but futile attempts. Happiness comes and goes so fleetingly. In a world filled with confusion and injustice, what is then the key to finding the true and everlasting happiness? Now, you wouldn't think, by the way, mind ruling over the heart, self-control would be this key to happiness. But we will show you how that's true. I have chosen to discuss this idea using the tools Chassidus gives us. In today's world, where self-help books sell in the millions and every other blogger or social media star offers inspiring tips for a better life, can we glean some insight from Torah and Chassidus to really better our lives and feel genuinely happy? Like almost everyone, this question was something I often pondered. Then I studied chapter 12 of the Tanya, the masterpiece of the Alter Rabbi, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, founder of the Chabad movement. Throughout my youth, I often heard the classic mantra taught in the Tanya that the mind rules over the heart. This is explained to me as a basic human level of self-control. Your heart may want one thing, your mind tells you otherwise. Choose with your mind. Nothing too revolutionary here. But of course, let's move along. Then I was taught it again. It is well known that when writing the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe was particular about every single word and every letter. The famous anecdote is told that he debated for hours over writing a word with the letter Vav or without it. If the Alter Rebbe was merely talking about self-control that way, I previously understood it, he would have written, the mind rules over your actions. That is self-control. Upon seeing the wording the Alter Rebbe uses, the mind rules over the heart, we must conclude that there is something deeper to be learned. Right? So again, if he was merely talking about self-control, he would have written, the mind rules over your actions, not the mind rules over your heart. The main thing is your actions, right? Why did you say specifically the mind rules over the heart? The story mentioned in the time to illustrate this idea is called V'chazar of Moshe Meislish, and I said this story earlier about how he was able to control his heart from racing. Right now, I'm going to skip the story because I said it earlier, how he was able to keep his heart at a normal beat. The Alter Rebbe later adds, this is not something we need to actively do. It is not something to work on or try hard at. It is our inborn state. Our mind naturally rules our heart. Our emotions are constantly checking in with the mind to see how they should be feeling. They look to the mind for agreement. When they receive an answer of clarity from the mind, they happily comply. Right? So again, our emotions are constantly checking with the mind. The emotion is the child of the intellect, and like a child is looking for a guide, for a direction, for an answer. If the mind has clarity, the heart complies. When the message from the mind is unbreakable commitment to something or someone, then the emotion doesn't argue. This understanding changes everything for several reasons. Right? So again, it's the mind rules over the heart, not the actions. It's important. And the heart is like a child of the brain. So it's like this. Firstly, the knowledge that whatever I may be feeling now is coming from just a thought stops emotion from building up to become this unbreakable wall. No emotion is ever real and everlasting because they all stem from the thought, which can change from one second to the next. So this is one powerful thing. If you're not feeling good right now, if you have negative feelings, if you have bad feelings, maybe even sinful, evil feelings, don't get too caught up in those feelings. This is what she's writing here. Don't get too caught up. Because at the end of the day, the feelings are rooted in the mind. And it was a fleeting thought that cause this feeling. Change your thought, you can change your feeling. The feeling is not immutable. Actually, right? Just knowing this alone is empowering. A moment of anger does not lead to a bad day or a week. I'll read that line again. A moment of anger does not lead to a bad day or a week. Right? How often do we feel bad and we're like, oh my gosh, this is the worst week ever. And let it go. Move on. And don't read too much into how you're feeling before. A moment. All right. If I'm aware that my feeling right now stems from my thought, that can change in a minute, then this feeling is a temporary. It is not something that I will always be feeling or I'm stuck feeling. Just like my thoughts, it is fluid. Okay. Secondly, with this understanding, we can address our feelings before they even happen. We often let our emotions get the better of us and build up until they feel too big or to live with. This can be feelings of anger, sadness, or resentment that seem to take over our rational thinking. When we understand that these emotions don't stem from any single act, but actually come from our thinking, we can address it. I can divert thoughts of anger before they ever become angry itself. By dealing with the root, which is always the thought behind it, the feeling itself will shrink before it manifests in behavior. All right, that's also clear. Another thing becomes evidently clear when we understand this. Nowadays, the most valid and unarguable excuse for anyone who doesn't want to push themselves to do something is, I'm just not feeling it. Why should I do something when I don't feel it? This can be with regard to spirituality. I don't feel spiritual, so why pray, right? Or it can even manifest in day-to-day life. I don't feel happy right now, so why smile or say good morning, right? So if someone says, I'll take it from the spiritual avenue. You can take it in your physical lives. Because I'm a rabbi, I'll talk from the spiritual avenue. When you get up and say, you know what, I don't feel like putting on tefillin today. It's not exciting me. Okay, but that's just a feeling. Feelings don't mean truth. Feelings don't mean anything. If you don't feel it, number one, put it on. Number two, work on getting excited about it. You need to study about it. Don't say, well, because I'm not excited, therefore I come to the conclusion that tefillin's not exciting, or you pray. Because I didn't find the prayers exciting, it means prayer is not exciting. No, maybe your mind needs some work to get your heart excited, but don't read any truth into the feeling right now. But all the time people make decisions, including their religious lives, based on how they feel. Rabbi, I don't feel this mitzvah. I don't feel that mitzvah. So you don't feel it. This is when the feelings decide. If you felt murderous, did you murder? No. Chas v'shalom. God forbid. When we acknowledge our power to control our emotion via thought, this argument loses all basis. There's no such thing as a feeling or lack thereof coming from nowhere. Feelings come from thoughts. So whilst I'm just not feeling it has no solution, the real problem, I'm just not thinking, it is simple to help. Start thinking about it. If I'm not motivated to do something, it's not due to any feeling, rather due to my mind not holding that thing in high esteem. If it would, my emotion would follow suit. Lastly, and arguably the most powerful tool this explanation gives us is that no circumstance in life ever defines how you feel. Your thoughts do. No situation in life, no matter how hard or painful, can rule over your emotions. Only your mind can do that. So regardless of circumstance, you can choose how you feel in times of crisis. This can be a lifeline. I have all the inner strength I need to get through whatever I may be, as long as I do what I think, right? So, right, there's all these books about happiness. That's why JLI had a course many years ago called How Happiness Thinks, right? It's like, what does that mean? Happiness is how you feel. No, happiness thinks. The key to happiness is in the mind, not in the heart. And the life situations that you have are not forcing you to do anything. They are not immutable. You have the choice at every moment. You can choose to be happy. So you could buy self-help books, but just remember this truth. The books have to start addressing the mind. I'm going to skip the story here because it's a great story. And it's a great story, but we don't need to read it. So let's read this paragraph here. This idea is expressed in the famous Hasidic mantra, think that it will be good. This isn't just a catchy slogan, it's the reality. Your thoughts will be how you feel if you are thinking positive. So therefore, feeling positive, how can reality be any different? It will actually be positive. That's the idea. Is that the key to good feelings are thinking positive, right? And as she writes here, our thoughts then hold a lot of power. So what should we think about? What thoughts and perspectives are conducive to healthy emotions? The world around us constantly chants, be positive, but why? What gives us the motivation to serve our Creator with joy, to be truly happy? And this is where she ends off. The motivation to be truly happy, of course, comes from a very deeply spiritual place, recognizing that you are always with God. And if you're always with God, there's always reason to be happy. Right? So again, you could pick up self-help books. You can also pick up books of Hasidic philosophy, and when you recognize God is always around you, you can always make the choice to be happy. So how does knowing God is around you being happy? Because when you recognize that everything is divine, then you see goodness everywhere. You see godliness everywhere. And again, you can read the rest of the article. And as she ends off, someone who's imbued with a sense of purpose, and how much more so divine purpose, finds happiness in that. I'll read that again. Someone who's imbued with a sense of purpose, how much more so divine purpose finds happiness in that. Your thoughts are consumed with that mission. You feel attached to the infinite through a common goal. You are indispensable and you're never alone. God needs you for his plan. What can give a person greater joy than that? So this is what we conclude with this chapter. We didn't finish the chapter with this mind rules over the heart. The mind ruled over the heart. What that means is that we each have the ability, if we only work on our minds, to lead better lives, bring us more happiness, more control, and maybe a few less self-help books. I'm not against the self-help books, but using them in the right way. And ultimately, the most important thing is to get to the healthy place where our mind is made up. I'm going to stop the recording, and I hope you'll all go out and work on your mind.